it so happened on this particular night that this Frank Bailey and his band had been playing out at Lake Quivira, and they started by and they heard this voice, and he says, "Wait a minute," and he slowed up, and so he pulled in there, and they came in, and he walked up to him and he says, "How would you like to sing with a big band?" Well, of course, they're all dressed in their tuxes, and they just looked like $1 million to me, and I was thrilled to death, and I said, "Oh, that's just what I'm looking for." So I would sing, and then they had 2 pianos up there on the bandstand, 2 grand pianos, and maybe 4 or 5 times a night I would sit in and we'd play double piano together, boogie or whatever was popular. And we went over real big, and then Frank and I sang duets together. That's how I met my second husband, Bob Ketchum. Now, he had a nickname of Bottles that he got when he was a child in school. The kids called him Bottles of Ketchup, or Ketchum. But he grew into it. He liked his liquor. But even with that, there'll never be another man like him, ever. He was truly a most remarkable person. Well, overnight, he'd just call and say, "How'd you like to go to Mexico?" And I'd say, "Okay." And he said, "Well, get packed." And so he came home with a Bell & Howell 8mm movie camera and read the directions that night. Got up the next morning, we left for Mexico. He had his guns, which had to be declared when we crossed the border and so forth. We went in at Nogales, Arizona, and went down the west coast of Mexico. There were no roads. We stayed as close to the Sud Pacifico, as they call the Southern Pacific Railroad. We came across sort of an outpost, and the rurales, as they called them, came out and looked at the license, got the name and so forth, and had us go on. Well, we went quite a ways farther, and I don't know how many miles, but there was another outpost, and the rurales come out and they checked. Yeah, that's right. Well, we learned later we were in Yaqui Indian country, and they would sit up in the mountains and they'd see you come along. They use their high-powered rifles and shoot you and rob your car and so forth. Well, we made it through there okay, and we went to Guaymas. It's a beautiful fishing place. We stopped at Miramar, and the rates were very reasonable. You could stay there, sleep there, and have all your meals for about 2 pesos a day. And from there, we're taking this path, more or less, with our car, and came to some water, and he drove on in, and the next thing we knew, we're sitting in the middle of this water with the water about 6 or 7 inches in the floorboards of the car. Well, he gets out, and he's gone quite a while. Here he comes back with a Mexican caballero on his horse, and there was some on mules, and they attached ropes, and they pulled us out. And we finally made it to this ranch where he intended to go tiger hunting. They're really jaguars. It was way back in, I don't know, we rode and rode and rode, and finally we came to this ranch. And this American family, a man and his 2 elderly sisters, and they lived there, and they'd get your safari, as I called it, ready with pack mules and so forth, tents and cooking equipment and stuff like that. And so Bottles, the guy, said I didn't want to go. Well, they left, and after staying around for a couple of days with nothing to do and no one to really visit with or do anything, I decided I want to go meet him. So they got me a guide and saddled a horse, and I got ready, and we took off. Well, the guide couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak Spanish, and if I had to go to the bathroom, I'd wave him to go on, go on. And we finally, I think we were like 8 hours in the saddle. We came upon their camp up in the mountains. And during that course of time, he already had 2 deer, of which they had hanging on lines to make jerky. And they had the Yaquis, who were more or less civilized group, were the guides. And they had a different camp than we had where we'd stop over. And this art of blowing in this horn they had was to try to locate where the tigers were. And the art of using this was handed down from father to son through the generations. And they'd leave, they went barefooted and wear boots and spurs when they're on horseback, but they would go by foot barefooted. And they would creep along they had these hunting dogs, and the dogs would locate a tiger. Well, then they'd send back for the shooter to come along to shoot it. Also, bottles run out of tequila, and he sent a runner clear back to the little town. I don't know how many miles he went, and he went barefooted and ran all the way there and ran back with the bottles of tequila for him to have. And then after the hunt, we got back safe and sound. And after the hunt, we left and started south towards Guadalajara, and there just wasn't any way to go through the Sierra Madre Mountains, we discovered, with our car. So we ordered a flat car, and we put the flat car on the next train that came, and we put the car on the flat car. We got in the coaches and the Pullman, and that's where we met Eddie. Now, Eddie, to us, looked like Mahatma Gandhi. He was a little skinny little guy, and quite good at writing. He wrote for a newspaper in Columbia City, Indiana. And we took a liking to him because he had an 8mm just like we had, and we figured we could exchange any parts that we wanted that he had. And he was so frustrated because being on the train, all the shots he ever got was just the beggars at the train where we'd stop, begging for money and so forth, and he never did get anything, wanting to sell you something and everything. That's all he ever got on his. Well, so Bottles took pity on him. He said, well, you can go with us. So we picked up Eddie and his belongings and put in our car when we got to Guadalajara. Anyway, we went on to, at Guadalajara we went to the bullfights, and we got real good shots of the bullfight. I didn't care too much for it, but it's quite a sport, and they just go wild. Ole, ole. So we get in our car and we start towards Mexico City, and then we decided we'd go out to Xochimilco, Gardens of Xochimilco. These were, it was swampland out there, and they built rafts and hauled dirt, and then they planted stuff on them, and flowers and everything, and they finally took root, and so there was just canals all down around all these little pieces of ground with beautiful flowers. They had boats there that they decorated fresh every morning with flowers on the head of the boat. And they used girls' names like Carlotta and Inez and what have you. And so Eddie and Bottles and I got on the boat. Well, they had boats that were loaded with marimba bands, and they had boats for food and cerveza, and it was very delightful and nice. We enjoyed the half a day that we spent out there. We decided we had time to go out to see the pyramids, which wasn't too far from there. I didn't even know Mexico had pyramids. But they have two. The biggest one is called the Father of the Sun, and the smaller was Mother of the Moon. There were sacrificial altars there, we were told, by some of the natives, that they had used to kill some of the slaves that were helped building the pyramids. They used their blood to mix the mortar. Well, that was the tallest thing I ever saw. I never saw so many steps, and I went not even a third of the way up. And, well, we decided we'd leave the next morning and go north. So we got to Monterey, and we looked all over. There was a beautiful spot with waterfalls and everything. Then we went on up through Laredo, and which was only about 9 miles from my mother's home in Alamo, Texas, where she lived with my stepdad, Ernest Hazel, who had a citrus ranch, and had it for many, many years, and had helped develop the Tangelo, and he would come down every winter to Alamo and take care of his ranch, and leave it in the hands of one of his sons the rest of the time. But his business was in Atchison, Lockwood and Hazel Printing Company. We had a nice visit there with Mom and Dad, and went on up, still had Eddie with us, went on up to St. Louis. He spent a couple of days with us there, and then we put him on the train to go back home to Columbia City, Indiana.